Recording.
All right, since we're virtual, I'll read this statement. I assume we'll probably be away from this pretty soon here, but as the not self-appointed, but requested pro tem chair of the IDC, I hereby find that conducting the meeting at an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at that location. Many officials, including the president, governor, health department, have found that COVID is a global pandemic and it still exists. And it may be easily transmitted and has spread throughout the world, including Utah. This has caused state of emergency to be declared, and we will not have an anchor location during the state of emergency, and that has actually expired. But as we end through the pandemic, for this meeting, we will not have an anchor location. The determination not to meet is valid for next, or in person to meet virtually, is valid for next 30 days. Okay, we got that on the record.
Well done.
No, and I appreciate in your announcement you sent out that any who are vaccinated and want to meet in person, are certainly welcome to, and we have the facility available. I see Adam there in the conference room. Probably a lonely place right now, but we'll all join you soon, Adam. All right, and the next, anything from the commission? We have no minutes to approve or anything this time. We probably will be only making recommendations as we go through the applications. That is the plan as we've discussed it. And so unless there's anything anybody else wanted to bring up, why don't we just jump into the application evaluations with staff? Is there anything anybody needed to bring up before we do that? Seeing none. Joanna, are you leading out, or are you going to have Leslie or Greg?
I will start and then they will take over. In my continuous effort to change up my PowerPoints and find the most soothing colors, although I realized if Weiler was on here when I said that, he would make a joke about blue not being soothing, but he's not, so I had to make the joke for him. He can listen to the recording. Let's see. Okay. We're really today looking at all of the applications and the tier designations to make sure they all gel and all look appropriate. And the reason why this is especially important is because even though you all did your reviews and they were great and we have lots of feedback, some of that feedback and some of the additional feedback from systems meant we had to move a couple things around. So going through the applications and making sure it all looks appropriate, given that the tier decisions that you made were to generally fully fund tier 1 and tier 2, and then to figure out tier 3 later. Those were your prior votes to categorize. So the tiers currently reflect these votes as they have come in with all the information, or the applications and the tier funding. I'm running through this pretty quickly so we can get to the meat of the matter. Anyone not remembering this process, not remembering the binding votes, the recommendations? You have not yet decided whether to fully fund tiers 1 and 2. That was the recommendation to the IDC, but that I think can change. Other votes probably can't change because we don't have a quorum. So that's what we are working on today.
And just to be clear, if that does change to fully fund, well, to make that commitment, we won't be doing that in this meeting.
Right. So we still only have 5.6 million and we still got too many asks for our funding. However, we got less asks for our funding than we got in the intent to apply. So generally a good thing. We worked again with the systems to tailor those applications and to get them accurate. I will say, even as we've figured out over these 5 years, even the best laid plans don't always work perfectly in communicating with 29 different systems who fund indigent and operate indigent defense somewhat differently. So I think that is reflected on some of the applications. And that's why this is really important, because you are the governor's designee and the Senate confirmed stewards of this funding. So these are the tier requests that we have currently broken down. Come on. Come on. There we go. This is just to show you how they changed. These were the intent to apply the last time we saw the money, and we got this much in requests. The tiers have shifted a bit as we hoped they wouldn't, but suspected they would. But the actual overall funding amount dropped by a couple $100,000. So we have, yes, I updated that correctly. 4,000,006. This is basically all of our money at this point, right? The tier 1 and tier 2 requests will eat up almost all of the funding, leaving only about 180,000 for the 1,000,006 in tier 3 requests. So I think we should review grant applications and go through the tier designations and then come back to talking about tier 3. And as you again review those grant applications, Greg's going to run that and he's going to show you the tier designations and then the supplemental comments that have come in. And the goal is to sign off that the applications support the tier designations. So that's our general goal here. I am going to now turn it over to my esteemed staff. Greg has way better eyes than clearly anyone else in the world. So if you can't read it, just remind him to zoom in. I have to do it all the time. Okay. Starting in alphabetical order.
This is a really large monitor, so
yeah, there are view options too for Zoom. So enlarge it, which I frequently have to do. So it works. All right, well, we're going to go through these charts. What we've done, and you've seen these, is we've summarized the requests and tier designations and identified where the applicants had a different opinion of what the request should be tiered as. And we've got opinions on what staff has put together as far as our recommendation. So we'll go through these, and then I'm going to ask whoever is present who has done review of the application to give us some comments, raise some questions, and we'll talk through a couple of points on each. First one is obviously Box Elder and is relatively easy to deal with. Sorry, Joanna. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to put the links to this and the commissioner comments in the chat so that you can follow along if you want to separately, if you need to see it bigger.
So these relatively straightforward, easy on Box Elder. They've got 2 renewal items that were identified by both staff and the applicants as tier 2. And then they have a new request for an administrative assistant who is, I think we decided pretty clearly an example of how that position would support the managing defender in the system. They also had a request for defense resources, which was new and consistent with the approach we identified. We have identified them as a tier 3. Let me say quickly too, as we go through all of these, defense resources have been identified as tier 3s throughout this process. We're not anticipating, we're not expecting to get into specific requests from counties or systems that deal with tier 3 defense resources. If people have comments on those, especially reviewers, we want to hear those, but we thought it'd be better to avoid going through each one of those and having dialogue about what they are and what should be a priority. So I'll skip through those. That's our brief summary on Box Elder. You can see the requests. There were a few comments from some of the reviewers, so I'll open it up for anything that those folks who reviewed this application want to add. So Heather, you had a question that you identified that's there. Curious about trade arrangement, you said.
Yeah, in tier 3 in the application, I think there was a cost where they had established a trade arrangement instead of paying a fee. And I was just curious how that actually works. It just seemed odd.
I found the same thing, and I didn't go out to investigate it. I don't think any of us did, specifically because where it was placed is a tier 3. And if it's an arrangement that actually worked well, it would be interesting in the future, but to know more. Other comments, Joanne? I see a few on yours too. Do you want to touch on anything?
The trade arrangement, that was them changing up the funding, right, Heather?
I'm trying to remember what the specifics were. I thought it was a service that they were receiving and they had done it in trade.
Right.
And I think that was partly due, I'm trying to open up their application, partly due to COVID and the cuts, and then Bernie shared basically his salary to make up for the cuts to others, is my recollection. But I'm not positive. But I agree. And then if you look at the supplemental system info, so we ask everyone to be sure that they had accurately explained how their requests tie to our tier funding, and not everyone responded back, but some responded back, and that's what this supplemental issue is. So I think their real focus is on that admin who's going to help the managing defender really increase the oversight and over juvenile court is my understanding, which I think my comment about the appeals, I think Deborah is working out. They just don't seem to fully understand yet that we handle appeals from counties of this size.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the message we need to communicate, but that's correct. Okay, any other comments or anything before we move to cash, Rich? Okay, let's go to the next one then, which is cash and Rich. You can see 3 renewal items at the bottom, all identified by them as tier 1, and also by IDC staff. The additional new items they've identified are managing defender, community resource specialist, and ESO. They called for the first 2 as tier 1. I'm sorry. You can see what they did. ESO and community resource specialists, they identified as tier 1. We identified them as defense resources. And the third item is a specific request for a managing defender position. And I'm going to ask Greg to explain why that says $12,000 instead of a full defender amount. But I just want to note for everybody, for those who did not review this, Cash is pushing for, and apparently they're making some progress on creating a public defender office. They're already planning to pull people together into a single building, pull all their contractors into a single building, which is a good start. And the explanation they have, and we've heard even beyond the application, is that they are working towards that situation and actually wanting to make the managing defender a county employee to start with. I believe that's correct, and also support staff. So I'll just leave that, but Greg, there's a discrepancy in how this is presented in their request and what they actually need, correct?
Yes, so in the current grant for fiscal year 21, the drug and mental health defender and the managing defender are one contract, where the IDC pays $78,000 for the drug and mental health contract portion, and the county pays $12,000 for the managing defender portion. In this new proposal, those are separate lines, and it's showing the managing defender at $90,000, with the county paying $78,000 of that. So, and then they're asking for the IDC to pay the $12,000. And so we're still working to clarify if they really are adding a whole position, or if they misunderstood the current split of their grant. And that $12,000 really just should not have been requested.
So what does that translate, Greg, to what how the IDC should act on this right now?
So the 78,000 is already on here as a renewal. And so if they decide that they want that position stays as a combination managing defender and drug mental health defender position, then it should just be renewed for the 78,000. If it is in fact an additional position and they do want to pursue this additional $12,000, it would make sense, and it would not be supplanting, since it was a new request for a managing defender position, so the IDC could fund that 12%, although the amount just isn't very logical in how they requested it. So I think on this, it would be good if we can get clarification prior to the June 3rd meeting. But for the IDC.
Go over to the system explanation. Did they clarify any of this? I guess I have it too.
Sorry, this is not scrolling the same way it normally does since I'm sharing for some reason. So that is cash one.
Cash, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited about cash moving in this direction. I want to credit Sean because he works up there now, but he's not on the meeting. So, we'll give anyone else credit who wants to take it while he's gone. I think, are your hands in this at all, Sean?
No, I've intentionally tried to be as separated from it as possible.
So, but I think the instinct when we met with the county to talk about it a little more is coming from a desire to have more accountability and more oversight, and the message has been received, whether it's by osmosis from you being there or through our persistent efforts over 5 years.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay, so not a problem.
No, it's great.
No,
I'm trying.
it's great.
It's a long-winded lawyer compliment.
Yeah. Okay,
Sorry,
so
I'm only used to long-winded politician jabs. So thank you for.
all right, so we are clarifying that, but what we're wanting to do today is get some thoughts or input from those folks who did review. Wally, I see you're here. Tom is not. I'm not sure who else reviewed this one, but if you have any comment, want to hear it?
Does everyone have that comment sheet? Are they able to see it?
If they're moving towards having a managing director and a centralized office, that would be fantastic. I mean, that's something we certainly want to support. I practice up in Logan occasionally and see the public defenders up there, and it would be good if they had a real supervisor, a real managing director.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is very promising.
Do we want to pay for, I can't remember what my question was. Do we want to pay for the building maintenance?
Yes, that was your question. And
Greg, can you switch to the comments?
And in most of the, actually in the several requests we had for building maintenance or overhead, we've identified that as tier 3. My thought on this is it's great they're starting the building set up. It's a positive move. That is a county function and a county role, I think. So there would be other ways for us to spend money either this year or in future to support what they're doing. And they seem to be comfortable with that idea, certainly.
And it was really only, it was 6,000 that they requested from us. So we're not actually buying the building, I don't think.
No.
Well, they're getting the building. It was the criminal justice interview place.
Right, exactly. So it's positive.
But those building maintenance, those building costs are in tier 3 at this point.
Okay.
Okay, anything else before we move on to carbon? Greg, that's yours if you want to go ahead.
Thanks, Adam. So with carbon, there's a renewal request for $102,084 in attorney funding. It was previously partial funding for 4 attorneys. We asked them to consolidate that under one contract. And then new requests, both $60,000, one for an administrative assistant which is determined to be tier 2, and then one for an investigator position determined to be tier 3 that could either be for just carbon or could be shared with Grand County. And these are the comments that we received. So no supplemental information from them, but the commissioner comments are there.
And my comment about the administrative assistant, it's not clear to me from the application how that person would actually reduce the caseload, you know, and help, but I think there's a general understanding that it would reduce some of the additional duties and outside work. And they've laid that out well, because it would decrease reporting. It's not going to reduce the caseload though. But that's true of a lot of these administrative assistant requests. Margaret, did you want to talk about your comment?
Well, I think mine was partially, I mean, as far as the administrative system, it was partially the same way. I mean, I definitely think that anything that we can do that would strengthen the data piece, the organization piece, help with the managing defender, as far as that piece is terrifically important. I guess my greater question as to carbon is, where do they fit in our larger hopes of regionalization? Would be nice if we could find them some partners. And I guess maybe the investigator is would be a step towards that, but I don't know how it works structurally.
Yeah, the attorneys in carbon also do Emory. Emory is not one of our grant applicants, but they do that work, and they also do Price, who is one of our.
Right.
You'll see in the comments from Price that even though carbon talked about regional, you know, bringing things together with Price, there's not really a plan there, but that doesn't mean we can't help them get better.
I'd forgotten about that Emory piece, which I guess since it's not there, it's.
But I think with the investigator, we encourage them to apply for that. That was one of the ways we thought they might be able to work with Grand, but I think that you know, it's going to be a tier 3, and I think they've asked in total for 100,000 for that position. So I don't think they necessarily have a clear map forward with an investigator, and maybe some hourly funding to start would be the more introductory way to work with an investigator. Because if you have one investigator paid 100,000 for 2 systems and 10 defenders, I think pretty much all of the defenders on this call can point out that that investigator will have too much work and too many conflicts to actually do adequate investigation. So that needs a little more fleshing out, but we definitely encourage them to think about ways. So they did that. They just didn't necessarily flesh it all the way out.
I think but as far as, you know, making the administrative assistant tier 2, I think I agree with that.
Yeah. And Margaret, were you on the San Juan meeting?
You know, I'm trying to remember all of them. I think so.
We definitely had meetings talking about carbon and San Juan regionalizing, and you'll see because San Juan did not apply, we still have not totally won over the San Juan County defenders into working with us. So I would say we have a southeastern Utah issue, which is both geographical and political, but Grand applied, so.
Baby steps.
Joanna, what's the answer to Rich's question about whether an administrative assistant that's helping the managing director will always qualify for IDC funding as part of, I guess, as a portion of the managing defender's salary? What's the answer to that?
He said, and a portion of the managing defender salary. I mean, I don't think there's an always. I think with our tiers, if they increase the capacity of managing defenders, then they qualify for our tier 1 or 2 funding this time around. Always. I don't know. This time around, it seems like those are the tiers, tier 1 and 2 requests.
I guess
Okay.
it seems to me that the question that might underlie Rich's comment is, it's easy to add an administrative person and then justify it as freeing up time for the managing defender. And that seems like a very fluid, on the ground reality, perhaps, and structurally not apparent.
I'd reiterate what Joanna said about not being certain in every instance all the time that would apply. We've got a few requests this year that make that same sort of request, and they explain it the same way. It will help support the structural system and support the managing public defender, but it's not entirely clear how or how much they need. So I think it is a ongoing consideration, but not a hard and fast rule, I would think, which is why you all review the applications.
And I think the closest thing to hard and fast rule is if the administrative assistant is working directly with the defender, right? So that they have that collaboration to work on defender data, on reporting, on accountability over the system, and you have the advice of the managing public defender with the admin, right? It's not just admin over here and defender over there, but they're a team working together to operate the system, because we know lawyers need help. And we know admins shouldn't be lawyers necessarily. So I think that team element is really key.
I think that's the question is like, I wish there was more detail about what the admin, like that, like, are we looking at admins that are helping with attorneys' schedules or filing stuff, or are we talking about an admin that is helping in, like what you're talking about, managing and maintaining defender data and helping with the reporting requirements and things like that? Because that clearly is something like you said, Joanna, all attorneys need administrative support, but that stuff with like defender data and the reporting and things like that, that clearly is like a huge benefit to a managing defender.
And stop on mute, sorry. I agree, Pam. This is their application and how they explain that.
And at some core level, without a manager to figure out, if you have an administrative defender there all alone, having somebody to answer the phone and figure out if there's been toner purchased for the copier is in fact saving time for serious levels of administration. So it depends on how much support there is, but at some level, all the support is beneficial.
Yeah, and it's just a question of which ones are the most beneficial right now under our tier system with limited funding for too much requests. Yeah, I think those are all really good comments. And we know that about social workers too, right? We know that about all of these supplemental people, that they reduce attorney time spent on non-attorney things. Yeah, okay. Do we want, they did not respond to our request to explain that further. Do you feel like you have enough information to confirm the tier designations on this, or do you want us to get more information from them?
It's enough for me.
I think
Way to be bold.
Yeah, I would be supportive of moving forward, mainly from the sense of, it sounds like, we're trying to build this up, and this is as they are moving in this direction. I think we can always kind of adjust things or pull things in going forward if we need to, but trying to support in developing this within the funds, I get that that's the issue. I think there's enough for me as well, at least in the sense that we can make a decision off it, and now it's just how much money we have to divvy out.
In reality, if they have no administrative assistant help at this point, and this is what we're giving them, I think that there's tremendous value and importance in doing so, particularly in terms of organization and that data piece. So
Okay.
I think I'd be in favor of it as well.
Great.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, much more succinctly stated.
All right, should we move on to Davis?
Yep. So with Davis, this is a new application altogether. Davis does not currently have a grant with us. First item is for an admin support position for $95,000. That's determined to be tier 1. In their executive summary, they do specifically say that that position would be assisting them to implement data gathering, since they're not currently doing that. The next position is a mental health social worker position at $105,000, and a parental defense social work position at $105,000 as well. Both of those determined to be tier 3, since they do not directly increase the managing defender's capacity. They've requested 4 additional defenders at $87,500 each. They did mention in their supplemental information that they provided that this would assist to reduce the managing defender's caseload. So one of those positions was deemed to be tier 1, and the remaining 3 were deemed to be tier 3. So that is the request for Davis. And then the comments, sorry, this is not scrolling right here, are there. So this supplemental system information provides that context that those 4 additional attorney contracts would reduce the managing defender's caseload by about a third, and that if not funded by the IDC, he is planning to request funding, additional funding for positions from his county commission.
I have a question. And I think we just need to ask them, but so Carbon's admin was 60,000 and this admin is 95,000. Is that because that person would be a county employee like Todd is?
I believe so.
Yeah.
That was the impression I got, because they said, this is the one where I think they specifically said they're including benefits, right? And that they would be open to exploring just the salary.
So
that's what I recall too.
On that point, Cash has offered to take on the benefits of their new county employees, and we have denied the benefits for Uinta County's county employees in past years, and they will probably be tier 3 denied this year. So for consistency, and I don't know how we do this, we might want to look at suggesting the county take those over.
I do agree that we need to be fair and consistent, and if that's what we've been doing all along, I think if I was asking for the money, I would understand that, and especially if they're willing to try to get the benefit side funded themselves. I think that makes sense and is fair, and then someday if there's more money, we can look to increase that.
I agree 100% with the consistency analysis.
Any other comments or thoughts from reviewers or anyone?
I just wanted to say I'm I'm concerned about the same thing regarding social workers that Joanna expressed in her comments. And I view social workers for these offices as being something that will in fact relieve administrative burden, also lawyer case management burden. And I understand the practicalities of perhaps not approving social workers in this round of funding, but for other reasons, it seems to me social workers might actually be a tier 1 kind of allocation.
Can I respond to that? Because I fully agree, and I've been struggling with this all along, as Leslie will attest, that we're saying these critical things are tier 3, but we're saying they're tier 3 because 1, they aren't renewals, they're new, and 2, the systems haven't explained how they will help the caseload, and that's our priority this year. I do think, given COVID, given the backlog, given all the increasing demands on public defenders this current year, we need to take this to the legislature, right? The advocacy for social workers and other help is critical, and that's the next round of funding that we really need to focus on, because that will do exactly what Mary's talking about. We just couldn't fund it this year because we need the managing defender there to be able to administer that, right? Because without a managing defender, we're just chucking a social worker into a system with no oversight and no accountability. And those of you who work with social workers, I think, know that, well, I'll let you talk about it, Pam and Margaret, how the collaboration between an attorney is the more successful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even though I'm not necessarily on most of the cases the social workers are working on, I'm still almost daily consultation with them on cases around our system. So in the 4 counties, and not only do they remove some caseload significantly from the trial attorneys, but they also are great tools for a managing defender in terms of really understanding what's going on in the courtrooms, where they believe challenges arise, where our strengths are, things that we need to work on and train on. So yeah, they're a huge benefit, and especially to the families and to the youth that they work with. They even the playing field as much as anybody in the system.
And Tom, I think we have a governor who is going to be very receptive to those arguments, right? About the more holistic view of the courtroom and the needs for individuals facing court proceedings, if I'm not overstepping in my presumption about him and the daily emails I get about their work in foster care and equity and inclusion.
No, I think you're right. And at least we have a sensitive ear in that aspect. I would probably say, I like what Joanna was saying about maybe we need to make a separate run at this, only in the sense that I agree with everything that's been said. The position is needed, and we open it up in one area. I suspect strongly that there are going to be requests flowing in from others. So can we fund it adequately to give everyone a similar level of access, or do we need to be careful about opening a door that could in and of itself? Those are significant costs if they spread out quickly. Just my question mark, maybe more being a little bit ignorant in the process, or at least new.
So I'll say, if I can, on this, because this is one of our key issues, I think it is worthwhile asking for separately, Tom, and at least considering that we've been working in our office on a design for how we could build a program. There are already social workers in a number of places around the state, and if we build on that, it becomes somewhat its own structure, because I think it has a role that's beyond just structural support for the managing defender, but really for everyone in all the defenders in the system. So we like that idea of building it, I think. Great. Well, thanks for raising that, Mary.
Michael, our chair is not paying enough attention to call on you. You just have to get in there.
Oh, it's fine.
I haven't been
just
calling
wanted
on anybody, and it
That's
seemed to
fine.
work.
My hand raised worked because Joanna brought it up. It's good. Moving back away from social workers to the Davis County administrative support position, I'm a little bit confused, and maybe I don't understand how Davis County has structured their program. But when I was looking at the budget, the project budget, and the grant materials, they've got a director and administrative support already paid for by the system for a total of like $325,000. And then in addition, they're looking for administrative support of an additional $95,000. And I'm trying to figure out why the double layers of administrative support tied both to a director and then to not tied to a director. I assume the director is the managing attorney position within Davis County, even though it's not IDC funded. But I guess I don't understand the overlap between those two positions. I don't know, Greg or anybody else, do you guys have some sense of how they've structured this and why the dual layers of administrative support?
My only understanding of the difference would be what was expressed in the executive summary that was not being done by the administrative support staff. And that would be the data gathering and management side of things. They also don't currently utilize, because aside from the coordinating defender and the admin position being county employees, the rest are contractors, and they don't all utilize case management software currently. So this position that they're requesting for administrative support is specific to the IDC's desire and request for them to move toward using case management software and to provide data. And so I would think, based on that, that the current admin position is more focused on the support of that coordinating attorney and the legal side of things, as opposed to data management, things like that.
I'll add to that from discussions we had with Todd Utzinger as part of this process in earlier meetings. What I recall him saying is that as we at the IDC have defined managing defender duties, there are a number of those that he currently doesn't handle. For example, he's not doing close review of attorney performance. He's not having close oversight of conflicts. So his point is, if I want to build that into my job, which already is full-time and involves a caseload, I need some more support to give me the time to handle that. He does say, I believe, that he would be able to reduce his caseload some with a new attorney, and that admin, according to the claim, would supplement his ability to handle those other functions. So that's where he's come from. And I think the one thing I would add, Michael, is my sense from what he said is he's got a full-time job with the caseload, and his current admin has a full-time job. If they're going to make a change, there has to be some other support, whether it's attorneys and admins or just admin. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what it means for IDC purposes, though, is that the question is the defender data from Davis County worth $100,000? And I don't know what the answer to that is.
And I guess to me, the follow-up would be why 73, in addition to that, why 73,000 for the one person and then 95 for this second one? Two also seems.
Davis County is, for what it's worth, is the third or fourth largest prosecution bundle in the state. It's a very significant effort to provide defender services for that court, for those courts.
And Margaret, I don't think that that is a correct reading of this. The 73 is for fringe benefits. That's not the admin. I think the admin and director are lumped together in there.
Got it. Okay.
And then 95.
I wondered about that. No, and there's no question. Look, 15 contract attorneys, that is a big, that's a big workload. I mean, that's maintaining data and keeping, track of assignments and making sure people are where they're supposed to go and doing the work they're supposed to do. That is not as insignificant as Mary said. That's a big ask.
I think it's also key to getting Davis County on board. They applied last year and then didn't take it on because they didn't want to, they couldn't see a way to do the reporting. And I'm not saying that necessarily justifies it, but I think it's key if we want them on board, and Davis County runs the state in the legislature. So I don't think that's a bad asset.
Hey, you guys, I want to clarify too. I looked at it, and what they actually are saying is that they're requesting the social workers as full-time employees, but that they would also be open to having the social workers be independent contractors. So I think that I was thinking it was relevant to the admin position as well, but it doesn't look like that is what they're talking about.
Just to follow up what Joanna just said, I had sort of behind the scenes communications a couple of years ago of near hysteria from this quarter about the prospect that there needed to be tracking of data, and this application is a sea change in that approach. And I would want to encourage that extraordinary reversal in attitude.
I might add on that a little bit too. I think Commissioner Kamalu has been a huge benefit as well. And I think she's selling what's needed to be done at a very passionate level. And it might be to our benefit, not to say that all this should be covered, but it would probably be worth doing something, some increase of, in order to show that we are appreciative and support that they're moving in the right direction.
I reviewed this request or this application, and as I said, I know that the administrative support person is to run the defender data. I get that, but I still see that as a system-wide improvement. Not that we're paying it for the defender data. I think that point was well taken and well thought out. But unless you have someone to do it, and if we can expand their capability to do data, that just helps the system. It is a system improvement. Now, they're not regionalizing with other counties, but they're a big enough user or a big enough, they have enough cases that I think it really improves the system. That's why I felt comfortable with it in my reviews. I thought it was well explained, but I think that point is well taken. I would just say, I don't think we're paying for the software, we're paying for someone to do the work, which I think is what you meant.
I think the observation that this is a big shift for Davis County is important to recognize. And it's one of those things that probably we want. And that should be something we put in the scale.
Greg, can we go back?
Sorry,
quickly?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Greg, will you go back quickly to the chart, tier levels chart for them, just so we can have it in front of us? And then Pam, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't finding my mute button fast enough. I apologize, Adam. But I mean, I think what you guys are saying about, and Mary saying like that it's a sea change is spot on. And I think the other thing that's really important about this is like what you're saying is that Davis County has, 15 contracted attorneys, but that there's some of these things that Todd hasn't been able to do as a managing defender, and that this administrative support person would be working hand in hand with him, helping him to also better understand and manage what their caseload and case weighting issues are. Like as they start to get a better grasp of defender data, like those other things that he's talking about that he hasn't been doing are things that are going to naturally increase in terms of the managing defender capabilities by having that support. I don't know if I'm making that clear, but to be able to work together with people and with your admin to really understand what the caseloads are and to be able to weight them and understand where people are spending time, because really getting to be able to understand defender data better becomes a really good supervisory tool for the managing defender. So it has huge benefits to both of them, I think. I mean, to both perspectives.
I asked Greg to put this up also because I wanted to be clear that they had identified a number of things. New requests is tier 3. We've identified a new defender, an additional defender is a tier 1, and therefore recommend funding that. It's explained pretty well in their supplemental information and in what they originally applied for, but I just want to make certain we had touched on that too. Greg, did you want to add anything on that?
No.
Okay, how would you like to move this forward? Is everybody comfortable with how we have designated it? Or discussion? How do you feel about where we go with this?
I'm going to ask the county if they would take over the fringe benefits for this admin, just to clarify that, so that we're not funding one at 95 and the other at 60.
With that, anyone else want to comment on this, or are we comfortable with it and we'll move on?
I just think we need to sort of table the question of social workers as a whole general category until the end of this conversation, because I continue to be troubled by not embracing requests for social workers. So I think that's something, because it impacts a number of these applications. I think we kind of need to put that to the end, and then the social worker requests may need to be handled consistently, but I just kind of want to reserve that issue.
All right.
Mary, are you saying that you disagree that they should be considered tier 3 requests, or are you saying that within the tier 3 requests, the social worker requests ought to be prioritized?
I'm struggling with whether they should be tier 3, given, and I know the criteria that got them into the tier 3 category, and I understand that. It's just that it occurs to me that social workers really do assist in, properly applied, really do assist in reducing administrative burdens, and not just administrative burdens, but caseload burdens. And so I'm not entirely clear that they belong in 3, but I understand why in this particular application, with this particular category of funding, they might belong there. I just wish we could encourage social workers more.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
For example, defenders need social workers. Look at Wally. They could help Wally sit up straight in a meeting, and they could help Wally. They're really beneficial things.
That's home health care.
I'm not sure that the social worker would help you in that regard. You think so?
I don't know. I don't know,
Only
but-
if you wanted to be helped, Wally.
I'm comfortable. I'm paying attention.
Good. All right. Well, with that, let's move on to the next one, which is Duchesne. Duchesne has asked for a number of different things. I'll cover the renewals first. We're already providing this adult criminal conflict contract, juvenile contract 1 and 2. Those are renewals. We've identified them as tier 2 also. The adult criminal hourly conflict, we identified as a defense resource. It's not specific positions. They are contracts for hourly work. And so we identified that as a tier 3, which may take some discussion too. But let me go on and we can tie some of these pieces together. They also asked for some new items. You can see equipment, supplies, defense resources, and reserves. They identified either as not in their intent to apply or as a 2. Those fit within the category 3, the tier 3 that we've applied elsewhere. So that can be discussed, but certainly that's consistent with what we've done in the other areas, I think. The other new things they've asked for is a managing defender and an admin. The managing defender, if you've looked at I'm sure you have, whoever's reviewed it, the executive summary gives some information on what their intent is with the managing director and how they would handle it. And then there's also some reference to admin support for that managing director. This managing director position for them would be entirely new. They had worked with Lance, Dean, and Jenny in Uintah County in past. They have apparently declined to do that again. And so they're asking for their own new positions. You'll see those are only $12,000 each, which is a small amount, but they have promised quite a bit through their managing defender. And I want to add one more piece to this because the question's been asked. I and Commissioner Kamalu and Rich Morrow and Lance and Jenny, but that's not part of this group. We spent a substantial amount of time talking with Duchesne County, their commission and their staff about how we could support them in a regionalized agreement. We made an offer to them based on everything we heard from them as far as concerns and requests over 2 or 3 meetings. And they were in the end uninterested in doing it. What they did do, though, is they adopted an agreement to have their managing defender handle all of the functions that we had suggested to them would be handled by the regional managing defender and staff. And those were built on the managing defender role and definition that we've built together over the last year plus. So their application asked for a small amount of money for their attorney to their managing attorney and their admin to provide all of the defense managing defender services that we've identified as appropriate in other areas. So I want to leave that for comment from anybody and see what else people
Can we
want
look
to
at
add.
the executive summary before we look at the
Yes,
comments?
yeah, please.
I have it up, Greg. Oh, there we go. So this is the sum total of their grant application with the addition of the contracts that were attached to it. And we asked them about supplemental information and they didn't respond.
And I want to just point out again, they make reference in their request in their documents for an admin. That's what they're asking for. But again, I don't see in this summary any clear explanation of what they want to do with that position.
But we do know it is the person who's in the county and not someone working directly for the defender who they're proposing who works in Taylorsville. So let's go to the commissioner comments.
So it's an admin working in the county office, not directly for the managing defender request?
Correct. It's the person who supports it's the commission, county commission administrator.
And my note is about, so over time, in the very beginning, when we started doing grants, we didn't have admins, right? We didn't even have managing public defenders. We were trying to get an assessment of the system. So in some of our grants, we would add on like $1,500, $2,000 for someone in the county to account for us, right? To sign the checks and pass through things. As we developed things, we started pulling back on those, and we denied those. We denied them for all three of those counties that we have listed there. And that was $1,500 to $2,000, not a $12,000 ask. This is asking for $12,000 for someone who has a full-time job already also.
Not only that, isn't it for somebody to be in that role who doesn't even reside in the county, who doesn't rub shoulders on a regular basis with decision makers, who, I don't know, this doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm being rude by saying that, but you've got a strong kind of regional managing defender in Uinta, Vernal, Daggett, and for whatever reason, Duchesne and that entity are not seeing eye to eye on regionalizing within the 8th Judicial District, which has very similar sort of caseloads, very similar sort of contracting issues, very similar sort of funding issues with their local economies being tied to the extractive industries, the ups and downs, very similar political issues that are driving a lot of the budget decisions. It's just so interesting to me that they wouldn't capitalize on and find a way to find some common ground on the existing managing defender system that's in place. I don't get it.
Well, let me add to that, Michael, and partly in response. The contract for the managing defender they've identified, we don't have it signed, but I know they've agreed to it, is including a lot of those functions, being the point of contact for the behavioral health system, being the point of contact for the courts in the area, working to do the recruiting for new contract attorneys, and to be there for all that process. There is a lot that is anticipated in that agreement, which would, I think, be difficult if one were not present, at least in the basin, routinely.
And on top of a full caseload.
Right, and that is the other point. As we've talked about this in other areas, there has been an expectation that if we're going to fund a new attorney position, that there's some explanation as to how the individuals that will help the managing defender to lower their caseload or their burdens. In this situation, they haven't made any reference to how the managing defender would reduce their caseload to handle any of these new duties. And again, it's possible, but to be consistent with where we've expected it elsewhere, I just have some uncertainty about how, I haven't seen an explanation of how that will be done.
To Rich's question on the feedback here from the reviewers, I guess we take from this that Duchesne County has abandoned the idea of entering into an MOU with Uinta. Is that a fair assessment of this request?
I saw that comment and Rich was out there for the first meeting. All I can say is we had several times had a request to them to tell us what they want, see if we can enter an MOU. We had an MOU to them in discussion with their full commission 2 or 3 weeks before their applications were due, and this is what we received from them. So I don't know the definite answer, but the facts seem to indicate so.
Have they explained why they don't want to take advantage of Uinta and the centralization concept?
Yes, they have. And as we had those discussions, we tried to build that into a draft MOU for them to consider and try to address all their concerns. And if it's all right, Chair Luce, I could explain a couple of those, just in fairness.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah. A couple of their concerns have been that the managing public defender who was working with them previously wasn't giving enough time to their county. They felt like he was paying more attention to Uinta and Daggett. They felt that he wasn't present to do those things and have those connections in the community that would benefit them. They felt that he hadn't done enough to build, to recruit for attorneys and then to oversee what they're doing and help with the hiring of that. So those were a couple of things. The other challenges they felt were they wanted to be more in control of the billing in their on their time, on their hourly contracts specifically. And they felt that the managing defender was not helping with that effectively or correctly. They wanted to be able to review bills more and then challenge if there were questions there. And they felt like there were some questions of accuracy that they were concerned about. And they wanted to have their own process really for selecting how they handle attorney hiring and review. And so they have developed another option or an option for how they would handle it themselves. There were probably other issues too, but that's the general areas that I recall.
But Adam, I mean, Tom, we were just on a panel with Commissioner Hanson, right, at UAC, and she was publicly very supportive of us. And I think they are. I think there's a gap between what the commission, just between the commission and what's actually going on that we haven't totally figured out. And I think continuing to work with them is important. I just don't know if this is the way to do it. But I mean, Tom, I think, do you agree with me that she was?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Joanna. And something's going on there. They just shut down they're no longer going to be taking grant funding for advocates. They shut that down. Their argument was that there's too much work involved in having to manage the grant to make it worthwhile. So they've shut that down. They're pulling that back into existing employees. And so I would say that something's happening there bigger than just, and I think Adam hit on some points. There's some relationship issues. There's some local control issues, I think, that are at play. Depending on how the money shakes out, it could be appropriate to do something that's helpful, that may not get us exactly where we want to be, but they feel like we're supporting them, and then yet not back away from, I agree with everything that's been said. It seems like this ought to be a regional operation, but that's not going to happen right now. And maybe the relationship things will improve over the next year or two, but they could even get frustrated enough and even back out, of things more. That seems to be what they're doing. So, yeah.
I will also add that I agree with those comments, both of you. I have also had multiple meetings with them, and commissioners have been very supportive of working with the IDC, and none of the complaints have been with regard to what we've been doing with them, at least none of the discussions we've had. And they understand that they want their system to function better and they want to improve it. And they also very clearly state, and I think we all buy into this, that their budget in that county is really challenging, and it doesn't show a lot of likelihood of getting a lot better. So they support what we're doing. They're putting money into their system and they're asking to partner with us. There are just some concerns about how they're going to carry out what they say they will do.
I think it's worth noting too on this, this is in the weeds in a way that probably we don't need to be, but there are 5 contracts in Duchesne County. 3 of those are handled by the Morrison Group, and the other 2 are handled by attorneys who are already being managed by the managing defender in Uintah County. And so, it just seems fraught with inefficiencies to do it in the way that it's being proposed, rather than to try and figure out a different way to forge a connection between what's already existing in Uintah, Vernal, Daggett, and Duchesne County. It just doesn't seem like money well spent.
My only commentary would just be a big ditto to everything that's been said. I think there's a subversive quality of something. I like the way that it was said, something bigger than this. I agree. I had the opportunity during the recent UAC conference mentioned to speak with 2 of the county commissioners, my former peers, and they're all very supportive of it, but I can tell they're holding something back in the conversation. I just can't tell what, and they're not being completely forthright. I think there's some inherent distrust, but that's what I'm calling something subversive, whether it's, as Michael's suggesting, through you went to county or one of those other contractors. I don't quite know. And since they're not being forthright about it, I can't peg it. But there's not a single one that has anything, derogatory to say about this setup that, anyway, so long-winded explanation of big ditto.
I'm trying to raise my hand like Michael Drexel, Ryan. I can be as polite as Michael Drexel if I try really hard. I think
That takes a lot of effort for all of us.
It really does. It really does. It's not in my nature. I can even lower my hand. I think the question then is, are these things tier 3 priorities, and we keep their renewals, right? We keep funding what we have funded in the past, but these new asks should maybe be more properly categorized as tier 3. I think that is a recommendation we could make, or some other feedback to the system about needing, a true managing defender and a true oversight and accountability, and not this sort of pieced together model.
Well, Adam and Joanna, just so I'm clear, you did reach out to them for supplemental information, right? And they did not give us anything back. So all we have to go on is what's in their original application, and that makes our job very difficult.
Maybe this again is my ignorance probably, but are we able to approve funding, so the 12,000, for example, and say, we want to do this, but we can't do it under the way it's structured. And if you're willing to make these changes or make this change, the money's there. If not, do we have to commit all the funding now to programs that we are comfortable supporting?
I'm trying to think through all the applications. I think, Tom, my answer would be, it would be difficult, or not difficult. It would be a different process for us to go back to a county and say, hey, we want to give you this money for what you asked for, but you didn't really explain it very well, and we want to know more about how you're going to do this after the fact of approving everyone else, essentially. I will add, Tom, I'm not sure if you were on, right? This work group is making recommendations and not having the final votes today. That doesn't come till the full commission meeting. So given what I just said, it's possible to reach out to Duchesne and say, the recommendation was whatever it is. You might want to give us some more information before you get to the full commission. But on the other hand, that was the point of the email that Joanna sent out 2 days ago saying, yeah, this is your chance to give us more information. If you feel it's been adequate, then good, we'll go forward with what we have. I think that may be a roundabout answer and not very clear, but maybe they're just thoughts about the rest.
I think part of the answer is also what we decided has not been voted on yet, is if we're funding tier 1 and 2 first and exclusively, and then getting to tier 3 with the leftover 100 and something thousand. Joanna, if I'm remembering the numbers you said, if we do that, then we could prioritize Duchesne in the tier 3, but then they're competing with the social workers and exactly what Mary asked, which was a good question about social workers. You're competing against a lot of things for a very small pool, but that's where, unless we change the tiers, or unless we decide to go outside of the tiers, which, then changes how philosophically we're looking at these things. That's the whole reason we went to tiers. So philosophically, those decisions are made by the designation, but we haven't made a commitment yet on that. Joanna, did I get that wrong? That's my understanding.
I mostly followed what you were trying to say, and yes, I think you got it right.
I think that's just so frustrating about this, because now I'm just going to be Pam and be annoyed, is that spent all this time going through and really trying to focus on the tier 1, and there's been so much time trying to figure out what Michael is saying, like what is the frustration or what is the problem between using what is already there as an existing resource, supervising what is three of our not managing, our trial attorneys that the managing defender is already supervising. I mean, it just seems like while they're able to make it fit within the tier 1, it seems like such an inefficient use of funding to do things that really aren't within core principles, right? To like take someone who really has a full-time caseload or a full-time job doing other things and then adding to. And it's not like you're taking someone who's a full-time admin for like the managing defender and we're adding a region to it and trying to build on that regionalization. What we're doing is taking someone who is, you know, I mean, like county, I mean, what we're really trying to say is we want you to use this funding to build resources that are defense resources, not split between something that is a part-time county employee doing lots of other things, but is really being a true resource that is dedicated to the defense attorneys and not sharing that stuff. And so, I mean, it's really frustrating to me because it, you know, while it can be classified as a tier 1 request, it doesn't really fit within a lot of the core principles of the use of funding for a tier 1 request.
Well, I have a different take, though. My sense is that whatever the politics are, if this county doesn't feel that Lance or that Uinta County is servicing their needs and that they're second-class citizens and getting leftover attention from Lance and not getting direct attention and not getting enough control over their own system, then I'm not offended by them saying, look, we think we need to have our own managing director. I don't like the idea of using the county employee who already has a full-time job. I'm not comfortable, or that seems like an ill-equipped way to assist the managing director. But if they don't feel that they're getting properly serviced or getting enough attention from Lance, it doesn't, even though we would like to go and move in the direction of regionalization, if it's not working right now, this seems like a legitimate request to me.
Wally makes a good point. I mean, far be it from us to try and like force people to be comfortable with, you know, some other systems oversight and people. I wonder though if there was a way where we could make an award here that is contingent on some level of cooperation between, you know, they've proposed Bill Morrison being the managing defender without any reduction of caseload, but making there be some coordination between him and Lance as managing defenders within the 8th district or something, so that it's kind of a cooperative effort between the two of them to support each other in the management of the defense resources within that area of the state.
I'll add to what Wally said, and I think Sean said the same thing. There is concern from them for a number of reasons about coordinating, collaborating with Uinta and Daggett, and I'm not certain all of the reasons, but this is their request that they put forward, and the more we try to modify it, I think the more we put the commission in the role of saying, well, let's hold your hand through this instead of giving them the chance to tell us what you want to do. They have good reasons, I'm sure, for wanting to do this on their own. My thought is, for this group, is the question maybe simple as, do you think that this request is something they can reasonably follow through on? It's reasonable they'll follow through on, or is it not?
And I think Adam is speaking only about the 12,000 for the managing defender and not advocating that we go against the consistent the awards we've given in the past.
Right, exactly.
Can we send a message that if we give them the 12,000, that we, you know, we're expecting to see sort of a little bit of what you're saying, Adam, that we expect to see something from this that begins to resemble our long-range goals, rather than trying to force them into a marriage with plants that they apparently don't want.
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer for Adam because that's how I roll.
Well, I agree with you though. So.
I think yes. And we developed the Managing Defender manual for a very deliberate reason, right? To provide guidance that has not been there before. It is also a tool that we can develop into a checklist, right? And a compliance and the increasing oversight of what our funding is actually going for. Because although we can't necessarily strong arm counties into doing exactly what we want, there is a constitutional floor and we have to have standards across our grants, right? And so I think, yes, going forward, we can work with any managing defender, and that is part of our plan. And what we want to talk to you all about after these grants go forward is strategic planning with these managing defenders to really bring consistency across the state. So yeah, we'll work. Sorry, Sean, you go.
So I don't disagree with any of that. I just think it's an important little nuance, and I think we're all talking around it. I just want to be really blunt about it, that again, it's a trust thing. And I worry about being overly assertive in this case to the point that where they already feel distrust, I feel against some of these regional partners we would love to see them get together with, that if they then see us part of that machination as well, it seems to keep their hackles up. And I'd rather that for the purposes of our long-term vision, they not see us as adversarial and see that, in other words, Judge, I think that the short answer to your question is yes. I think that you would agree that that needs to be more personal in the background as to that conversation, as much as we'd like to be formal and put it in writing.
Yep.
But I think that until we build that trust that they seem leery of giving us because of whatever super dynamics they got going on in the background, I think we're better off just keeping them on board. Something that Joanna said, though, also makes me think, not that they're not sophisticated enough to understand what Joanna just said about the constitutional floor, but I get the feeling that, kind of like another county last year, they just feel as though we're arbitrary and we could perhaps change the way we are so darn uptight. And they have not put anything like that verbatim. So please don't take that context and run with it. It's my wording, but I just don't think that they just don't know what they don't know, and they don't see what we do. And I think where we're frustrated, to Pam's point, is we would hope that they would trust us given our your professionalism, the experience, particularly with me and Lorene as county commission peers. And it's just not readily being handed over. And I don't quite know how to fix that other than to maybe just be part of we provide them a sense of calm and consistency rather than being one more irritant in that super kind of dynamic situation they've got with their regional peers.
And we're really just talking about these new asks. We are not talking about cutting their renewals that are appropriately requested, right? So we have 6 figures already invested in this system. Just to point that out.
We tie the requested admin money or, position into the managing defender's office and under the managing defender rather than under the county. It still provides some additional administrative support for data and whatnot, but also provide that independence that we also are seeking for in terms of our representation.
So
go ahead, Ryan.
I guess here's the question I have on this. Are we at a point that we can move to the next one, because we've got a pile of them left? And we know what the tier 1 and the tier 3 requests are here, that we can recommend to follow. I think what was just said, to recommend the tier 1 requests, and then we're going to have to parse out tier 3 when we get to that anyway. Or is there more to explore on this item? Because we've been on for a while and I'm not sure We're not talking in circles yet, but I'm not sure we're getting to a resolution.
Oh, come on, be blunt.
That's one of my flaws, Wally. I try to be subtle. So, no, if there's more to say on it, I'm just not sure we're answering the question of the tier 3 issues. And I agree with the points. I mean, I think I was on one of the calls with them, if I remember right, early on, and I get their concerns using other people's, managing defenders. So I think the points were well made.
I would just say,
I'm supportive.
Sorry.
No, I'm supportive of moving forward. I think we've covered all of our feelings. Now, what we do at the end of the day with it, I guess, remains to be seen, but I think we've expressed at least any feelings that we have towards this, but I'm fine moving forward, to your point, Brian.
And just the question is, do we want to look at the tier designation? That's what we're looking at today, right? Does the IDC, do you all agree that our staff tier designation gels, or that it should be revisited for the final award recommendations? And so those two have both been designated as tier 2 because they are an independent, smaller system based on their request. Are both requests increasing the capacity of the managing defender, which is the tier 2 standard?
Yeah, and I apologize. I said tier 1, but yeah, tier 2 because they're smaller. Anybody want to change those designations, I guess, is what's being asked.
Right.
Well, I think that's, I guess, to Wally's point, like with the managing defender, but with the support staff person, just without a lot of information about what exactly it is that they're going to have. I guess if you're going that way, you have to trust that they're going to use this individual for X percentage of time there's just not a lot of explanation as to how it's going to benefit. But we've funded other admins on the idea that they're going to.
Well, to that point, we have follow-up where we can measure this. So if we get to this point a year from now and see that on there, we'll have follow-up that we can tell what system benefit the money we provided did.
We have told other counties no about funding a county administrator. I just want to say that again.
Would their county administrator have been tier 2?
Well, I don't understand the question. So this admin is different than Carbon's admin, different than Davis's admin, different than a number of other admins, in that this is not a defender admin, right? This is a county administrator, someone in the county office, and then someone separately working in Taylorsville being the managing defender.
Well, is it reasonable then to, based on the lack of information and Duchesne's failure to give us and clarify what's going on here and how this is actually going to fit into our structure, why don't we move the admin to tier 3 and leave the managing defender tier 2, just kind of split the baby at this point?
That's actually a valid point and consistent with what we've done elsewhere. Right? Does the admin really support? The piece I want to add, and for any of those who did the full review of their application who are here too, the only information we have really on what the managing defender will do and the admin, the support, will do is in the contract draft or the contract that's in the file. It's pretty clear on the managing defender's role, and then it's pretty clear on what they're calling a financial point of contact. We're assuming, and I think it's correct, that financial point of contact would be a Duchesne County employee and the managing public defender would not be. So all these questions we've worked out, I guess the follow-up is, are they willing to identify someone else as the admin for for the managing public defender. And I guess in part, is the admin request even for that Duchesne County employee, or do they anticipate it's something else, some other individual? And to be quite honest, I'm not certain, even after all the discussion. So I guess my summary is it could be left as tier 2 for both of those, but I would certainly be concerned if they're planning to have the county employee be that admin. And I'd encourage the commission to figure out how concerned they are about that.
I would feel good going with what Heather suggested, splitting it tier 2, tier 3, and then we'll have this conversation again at the end when we're looking at tier 3 monies. $12,000. I do agree that consistency is important. So that pulls me pretty heavily. I also feel that in certain circumstances, they're trying to keep a partnership and keep people on board could be important too. For $12,000, I think it's worth having that conversation. But I would suggest we do the 2 and 3 category for those two and then come back to that.
Okay. Should we just move forward? I think we've got a good proposal.
Good point. Okay, any real objection to that? Okay, thank you. Then Leslie, I think you're next on Grand.
So Grand, shorter, bit simpler, but there's still some stuff to discuss, which is, so Grand is one of our.
You gotta lean in to your microphone.
Sorry, my microphone's not the best. It does not seem to like being back in the office. Grand is one of our new applicants, so all 4 requests are new. They have a managing defender contract, a part-time defender contract, an investigator contract, and then defense resources are the asks. There is some clarification that we are working to get with them in that they already have a defender who is, he's not currently a managing defender. They expect him to step into that role. And so they're looking for that managing defender salary bump. And so these numbers will change a little bit in that in total for their 3 defenders, one of whom is not on here because it's a system side spending. Oh yeah, Greg can pull it up. In total for 3 defenders they have right now on the system side, they're spending about $135,000, I believe. And we are going to talk with them to make sure the system spending in gray is still that same amount. So the way they've done it right now is not technically supplementation because altogether the system spending of $240,000 at the bottom there is the same as their average spending for the last 3 years. We just want to make sure it's kind of in the right piles. So what that means effectively is that the numbers for the IDC grant awards for the most like the managing public defender, I think the grant award that they should be asking for, which we'll discuss with them, is going to be about $30,000 less. I probably have not explained that super well, but Greg can definitely clarify if you guys have more questions.
Any questions on that, or do those that reviewed it want to comment?
You know, like comments. Thanks, Greg.
My comments are just based on their application, and I think I'm really excited that Grand is coming in. To Margaret's earlier point, Southeastern Utah has not been we have not worked with them as much as the rest of the state. And Grand they have a very eager and involved and helpful, not sure of her title, but who has really brought the county forward in thinking about how to provide indigent defense better. So we have a good advocate there and a good managing defender. The problem is the managing defender is also doesn't live in Grand, right? No one can because it's too expensive and there's no housing. So almost all of their defenders live outside of the county. And I think that speaks to the bigger problem of how small rural counties handle public defense, right? And Grand has a different problem than others, but the fact that they're on board and the fact that we have a managing defender willing to work with it and very excited to work on defender data, I think is really promising.
Who is the managing director, Joanna?
I think they want to contract with Aaron Weiss, and he is a former Idaho public defender who's been doing contracts. He actually worked for us on Carbon a year or two ago. He was on that contract, and he has been doing Grand for the past couple of years, but not as a managing defender.
He's also, if I'm right, on the appellate roster, isn't he, for criminal?
Not Aaron.
Where does he live, Aaron?
I don't know.
Is he in Emory?
No, I think he is in southern Utah County.
I want to say Spanish Fork.
Spanish Fork, yeah. Because you know him, Heather, did he do work in Orem?
He has done some conflict work for us.
Got it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm trying to think, and he does have, I think, some contracts here with other municipalities for defense work in this county.
So does anybody have or desire to change the designations that staff recommended on there? Okay, I think Grand, we're kind of set then. So what's the next one?
Next one is Iron, Kane, Beaver, and Parowan all together. This is a new regionalization effort. Obviously, we've been working with Iron for quite a while. We've had discussions with Kane, Beaver, and Parowan, and they've been working with Shane in Iron County for a while. And they're really all on board with this idea and coordinating contracts too. So it's very positive, and that's good. You'll have to decide whether their requests are appropriate, but that's where we ended up with them as far as a plan. So you can see there are renewals for quite a few things. There are attorney renewals, but then there are also primarily compensation increases that are on the second page. Again, compensation overhead, which you see at the very bottom. I'm sorry, I've gone to Utah County by mistake. I turned over my page. So back to Iron, Kane, Beaver, and Parowan. They have a renewal for the managing defender. All the others are requests for additional attorneys. The primary focus is of the priority ones is legal admin and admin support for the managing defender, and in order to cover those additional counties and Parowan, and an additional attorney, which from our review of their application is intended to take a burden off of the managing defender so that he can reduce some caseload. The system otherwise has attorneys already in place, and while there was a request for a second parental defender, it wasn't clear from the application how that really would help in addition to the single additional defender. So other items we identified as tier 3, I think valuable and important to the system, but not fitting our definitions right now.
So do these have any comments that they'd like to share? And if you could go to the comment page.
If you remember, Kane applied last year and we had to cut it because we didn't fund any new counties last year. So I'm glad they came back, and happy to see Beaver involved also. Those are two counties, smaller counties that will really benefit from this. And the managing defender oversight. They did ask for 2 admins. And so I think one is tiered as 1, one is tiered as 3.
And that goes to, along with the parental defender, how good their explanation is, how it increases capacity of the managing defender or takes caseload off of that individual, correct?
Yes, sir.
So anybody else have any comments? I'm moving us along. If I'm moving too fast, slow me down, but anybody have concerns about the classification in this case? All right. Let's jump to the next one.
Okay, next one is Utah County. And Greg, let's stay on the first page of Utah County just because we can see the new ones. You'll see as we go through this, obviously all the way down, they've identified a compensation increase as a tier 1 item. We've earlier discussed all compensation increases we'd identify as tier 3, even if very important, but that's what you see there. Rent, utilities, and overhead was a new request. Tier 3 also, we've grouped those for others as tier 3. Second page is renewals, and they identified tier 1. We did all the way down also, with the exception of defense resources. They have a pretty long explanation of their need, which was in the files, and plenty of questions we can discuss, but most of this is renewal and putting tier 3 to all their new item requests. The reviewers I have were Ryan and Pam. I'm not certain who else was on that, but either of you want to make a comment, add anything? I will. Oh, I do want to throw in, well, I'll leave that up. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I can start with my comments really quick. I think it's a great application. I thought the tiers were good. I appreciated their summary. It gets into my, I guess I'm becoming a verb for Joanna, with this idea of ongoing funding versus when are our applicants going to start replace that or grow their system outside of our ongoing funding and not grow our funding, or are we going to get enough funding to keep doing this and take on new people and expand the system? As far as additional compensation, I would say that should always be a tier 3. COLA is very important, I think is necessary, but if they're not even planning to take the COLA increases, then it's clear to me they're never planning to take over the funding for these positions, which means this will always be a IDC funded position, which if that's a long-term, that's fine. It just to expand the IDC and help other counties and cities and others, we're gonna need to find more money over time. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And that, folks, is the verb to Ryan lose something.
Pam, did you have a comment?
No, I like Ryan said, I mean, I thought it was great. I think that Utah County has been a huge, kind of been the guinea pig for a lot of things and has always stepped up and done a good job. But I liked the request for the parental defense stuff because I know that they're really trying to move towards specialization in juvenile court. I think it was just an issue of the way that the grant stuff was set up this year for tier 1 requests and tier 2 requests, making sure that the parental defense thing was also impacting or benefiting the managing public defender. But I just had that comment there because I did like that, trying to move towards that so that there is a clear delineation between child welfare and delinquency, but I understood why staff moved it from a tier 1 to a tier 3 request.
And I should say, Pam, I thank you being here from the very beginning. I will say Utah County has been an incredibly good partner and has done probably the best at regionalization, taking care of things. So my comments aren't picking on them. I mean, they've been the poster child of how to do it right. It's just a fundamental question of funding is always my comment.
Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Next one then is
Well, 1 second. Does anybody have questions about those designations? This one's a lot longer than some of the other ones and had, a fair number of things. Basically the renewals were all put as tier, well, most of them were put as tier 1 except mileage from what I can see there and what I remember. but there were any additional compensation was moved to tier 3 and then the parental defense. Did I miss any, Pam? Okay. Anybody have concerns over those designations? All right. Sorry, Adam. Thanks.
No,
for
no,
moving us on.
that's great. That's what we need. No problem.
Just because this one was bigger, I wanted to make sure everybody understood.
Sure. Next one is JUAB, and Greg, you're going to take that.
Yeah, in fact, I'm just going to talk about Juab, Millard, and Sanpete together. This is a regionalization project, and their requests contain shared positions. So first, I just want to recap what the renewal items are for each of those. So with JUAB, the renewal is for partial funding for 5 attorneys in the county as well as mileage. The renewal of people is tier 1. The renewal of mileage is tier 3. Similarly, Millard's renewal is for 4 attorney contracts and mileage. And then Sanpete's renewal is for partial funding for 6 attorneys and mileage. So those are the unique renewal items. And then they also are seeking to renew an administrative assistant on each of these requests titled Admin A position. Each of the 3 counties has requested $29,821 of that position for a total of $89,463 across the 3. So that is a renewal of that administrative assistant position. And then they also are seeking to renew parental defense social worker at a cost of $34,435 each and a total of $103,307. So again, a renewal of a shared position. And then in addition to that, there are some new requests. You can see the tier 3 items mainly on the new requests here are a 5% COLA that was requested on all positions, similar to Utah County's request. They've also requested a new position, which would be a managing defender that would oversee the 3 outer counties. So again, Juab, Millard, Sanpete. This would cost $39,500 in grant funding for each county at a total of $118,500. They've requested a second admin position at a cost of $19,607 each and a total of $58,821. Both of those tier determinations are set at tier 1 currently. And then in addition, they've requested 3 new positions that are determined to be tier 3. And those are criminal defense social worker at a cost of $33,000 or each and total cost $99,000. A parental defense social worker, individual cost $33,000, total of $99,000. And then a juvenile child welfare specialist attorney at a cost of $33,000 each for a total of $99,000. So those positions, again, were determined not to increase the capacity of a managing defender and were determined tier 3. So that is a recap of all 3 of those counties.
So did after you made the designation, did you send back to the 3 counties any requests for supplemental information if they wanted to clarify? Oh, there it is right there. Sorry.
Yep. So here's that page. Doesn't look like
Utah County really only responded for Utah County, and that's who it was sent to. So they didn't really respond to it. They did, if you see in the Utah County comments, kind of overlap their comments. Greg, if you want to go to Utah County.
Yeah.
Tiny, tiny print.
Nothing that you felt required a redesignation though in the explanation. So does anybody have any questions or want to comment or discuss the different designations of tiers?
And I could say that I think the intent of both the child welfare specialist attorney and the managing attorney was, as I understood it, to employ those attorneys, full-time and really almost more within the structure of the Utah County structure, and yet so have them, basically an intermediate level managing defenders, both in the juvenile court and in the district courts of those 3 counties, so that there's easier and better kind of boots on the ground, on a daily, regular basis of what is actually happening in the courts and with the representation and data there. I think those were the intent of those 2 positions, as I recall.
Any other comments or Margaret, do you feel that they're correctly classified as tier 1 and 3?
In an ideal world, I'd love to see both of them classified as tier 1. I think we certainly have, I think the managing one for the criminal side is, and I think that's appropriate. With the funding the way it is, I don't know that I'd love the help, and I think it's needed. And I think it's certainly could be classified as tier 1. I don't know that I'm asking that it be changed to that, given where we're at.
Well, is it something that if there's further explanation that you could show the staff and the commission for next meeting of how it expands capacity? I think we can relook at and revisit, because that's the question, right? If it expands the capacity and we're just somehow missing it, then we need to classify it correctly. And if we're missing it, that clarification may help. John, I saw your mute.
I would just say, Margaret, do it now.
Yeah,
And
just do it.
if you want it, and then commission, and we'll make the decision to move it now. I think we're not going to be able to really move categories that much in the next meeting. That's what this meeting is for.
Look, I think the point is the same. I mean, if you look within our regional system, we have, in addition to Utah County, we have 3 counties that cover a lot of territory, and both in juvenile court and in the district court. And while we've got great contractors there, I think our opinion is that really to truly fulfill all of the duties of a management, that we need to have a greater presence in those courts and working with those attorneys. And that's what the request was for, both for the district court as well as for the juvenile court, since they, truly are separate systems and require, separate skills and separate knowledge and understanding, as well as it was a way to somewhat alleviate caseload concerns, even within the current contracts. So.
Would it alleviate the caseload concerns of the managing defender and allow that system of action, or just of the other contractors?
Right. I think what it alleviates, I think what it does is it allows the management structure to have better capacity, much better capacity to fulfill the obligations and the duties of a management structure. That, under our current structure, we really need that, some intermediate pieces, especially in those counties, to correlate and to direct and to work in concert with myself on the juvenile side and with, Tom Means, especially on the criminal side. That there's a lot of space that otherwise we're trying to cover and travel on a couple horses.
Craig, could you highlight the positions we're talking about? It was the parental. It's not the social worker positions, correct, Margaret?
Correct.
It's the
juvenile child welfare specialist.
Yeah.
So Margaret's proposing that we move that to a tier 1. Does anybody object to that? It would move $33,000 from the tier 300 and something amount now and move it into tier 1.
Just to clarify, this position is a management position, but it would be getting paid the same as a basic attorney. Basic's the wrong word, but a non-managing attorney position.
Well, I mean, I think though that would be that amount in the 3 different counties. Juab, Millard, and San Pete.
Right, and I'm pretty sure, so the social workers are the same. So like the social workers get paid $99,000 in total, and then this managing defender would be getting paid the same as the social worker. And then I'm pretty sure the attorneys are the same amount, but I could have misread that as well.
So it's not $33,000, it's $99,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Does anybody have an objection to doing that? I mean, I know we're not making a motion and a vote. Is anyone not persuaded that this expands the system at this point? All right, I'm not hearing or seeing anything. I don't have my chat open. There you go. Then I propose we move that to tier 1. With the understanding we've just decreased the tier 1, or sorry, the tier 3 by another $99,000.
Can I just interrupt to say, then I feel bad that we didn't do that for Utah County's child welfare. Like, I mean, I think, I mean, I'm in full support of it, but it's kind of the same argument both ways. So anyway.
Well, and just to be clear, that's a $99,000 reduction to the pot of tier 3,
Yeah.
which leaves us with $50,000. Is that where we are?
About a little bit more than that, but I don't know that should drive your considerations, because the pot for tier 3 is inadequate for any of it.
Sure.
Yeah,
1.7 million in requests for it, right?
and I think the main point, if this is truly a tier 1, we should fund tier 1 first. That was our goal of setting up the tiers. That's why we decided one went into the tiers. The question is whether or not there's been enough explanation that these 3, because I could see where child welfare specialists in some counties do expand the system and in other counties may not. And I don't know that we had the same understanding of Utah County.
Well, and this is, I think, our attempt at taking the next step towards greater regionalization by, strengthening the ties and the management structure and just the systems as a whole, the counties as a whole, under, the one umbrella. And this is, I think, where we, at least looking at the four counties, felt like this was a piece that would greatly aid fulfillment of the roles of managing defenders and systems.
So it'd be for Joab County, San Pete County, and what, I lost the other one, sorry.
Millard.
And then I guess the question would be if Utah County, if it's the same argument. I know that takes from the tier 3 pot, but as Joanna said, that's not the concern. The concern is funding system-wide improvements first. Sorry, Joanna, you had something.
No, I interrupted you, so sorry, Ryan. Thank you. Quick question, Margaret, really hard question. Are you going to be able to hire this person? You just had a lot of difficulty hiring 2 child welfare people. There is a shortage of attorneys in juvenile court that is hurting us. And then to think about developing this into a management position across the counties is going to take a lot of strategic planning. Yeah.
Right, and I think that's some cooperation between the counties to allow it to happen.
I want to add something if I can, Ryan. And I hope I'm not out of line saying this, but I'm a little concerned about this process we're going through right now. We're able to take in some additional information because Utah County is represented in the group. I'll leave that to all of you, but this, as much as I think this is a great idea, I'm just concerned about whether it's reasonable to have this dialogue and make a change.
If I had to prioritize things as far as the Juab, Millard, and you went Stampede, and you understand that I'm trying to be objective as possible. I mean, at this point, I would rank the juvenile specialist probably 3rd on that list, simply in part for the reasons that Joanna indicated, but also in recognition of the juvenile piece is a smaller piece just by nature of court. I'm not saying it's any less important, but as far as individuals and case numbers and case, it is a smaller piece.
So Margaret, would you be okay then if we left it as a tier 3 for now, and then when we get to the tier 3 money, we're going to have to set up some way to prioritize certain positions, as Mary brought up before, social workers, we've decided tier 3 and things like that. We're going to have to figure some way to figure that out and readdress this question then.
Yeah, I think it easily could be tier 1, and at some point I think it should be, but I don't know that it has to be today.
Okay. Well, and I asked Joanna this offline because we're dealing with it as a city. There is it called the America Rescue Plan money? We had CARES Act money, now we have America Rescue Plan. I know Joanna's requested some money from the state's pool of that. The state got, I think, about 1.5 billion, if I remember right. Roughly. The numbers are a little big for my personal budget, so hey, it's hard to remember. But I know, Joanna, how much did you request?
Around 850,000, but that was for backup attorneys and administrative assistants to help with the caseload backup. But I think we did encourage all counties to look for alternative sources of funding when we sent out the application.
So that's maybe something we can address then. If we've already got it pegged for a certain thing, maybe we can't use that, but I know that money is available. So Margaret, thank you for all your comments and your input. I know it's hard to be part of the application and part of the discussion on it. So I recognize that.
Hey, Ryan, I'm going to have to drop off. I have to be at a in-person meeting at 3:30. But just know on the CARES Act money, there's $1.5 billion, and I was told there was nearly 8 billion in requests. So hopefully, with Joanna's request and what she's pushing, we can get some funding there. But it's a bad pool of money. It's not like we all think it is. So
it's already 8 billion, huh? Excellent.
That's what, yeah. I heard 5 from one source and 8 from another, both in leadership roles.
I'll say this, and Joanna put it eloquently, that many individual cities and counties, the bigger cities that got direct payments or will get direct payments, and counties. So I think that's a good resource. I want to talk to my city manager about it today. That's a good resource that we can pull on to help and beef up our indigent defense. So a little off topic. Sorry, didn't mean to take people's time on that. What applications do we have left? And thank you all for the comments.
We have a couple of cities, Price and Nephi coming up, Salt Lake, Sevier, and you want to Daggett.
All right, let's go to the Nephi.
Nephi is actually easy, unlike the other one I said was easier, which is small city, just asking for 3 renewals of 2 small public defender contracts and then mileage. And the public defender contracts fit in renewals fit in tier 1 because they're renewals from last year. And then mileage is that tier 3 category that you guys will determine how to handle later.
Does anybody have any comments or changes to the designations? Okay, what's the next city?
Next one we have is Price. Again, a renewal, simple request, tier 1. We identified it as tier 2, I believe, because it wasn't clear they were regionalized with carbon, if I'm remembering correctly, but they have been a partner. They're asking for renewal of just the single conflict counsel contract.
Anybody have any questions about that designation as tier 2? All right, next one.
I think I'm in order. Salt Lake County. If you look at Salt Lake, they are asking for a couple of things. The renewal at the bottom is relatively straightforward. Obviously, the 2 renewals, the renewal at the bottom. The new items are, I'll start at the top. They're a little complicated in their request because the item they're asking for as a coordinator is really intended to be something that works for the county and works between all the different contractors they have, right? They have 3 primary entities, one for adult criminal, the other for child welfare, and then for delinquency. The request, their application, I believe, laid out a very good explanation of how that individual would work. Not so much how they would, not that they would reduce caseload on the current managing defenders, but that they would help to provide support and coordination with them on behalf of the county as a whole. That is a position that they are requesting a total of $75,000 for. They also are splitting that cost, so the full cost for it would be $150,000. They're asking IDC to carry part of that. That's that piece. If anybody who reviewed the agreement wants to explain that more, it is a little bit different from the others that we've looked at, obviously. And so I'll stop there for a minute, Ryan, if that's good and anybody wants to speak to it. We've identified it as tier 1, given the explanation and the scope of what they're doing and really what we think fits within a large system and their approach to how they manage it.
Any questions or comments?
Okay.
I really like that Salt Lake County is volunteering to share this position with us. They're splitting it in half. That's a real commitment. I would say that this should be Ryan loosed in the opposite way to be supported.
Also note that, given sometimes the way that Salt Lake administers some of their contracts, and I know just even on certain appellate matters and things, it seems like this additional administrative support and help would be greatly beneficial.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the primary piece they're asking for. Then again,
LDA didn't request 4 new attorneys. They requested a 16% COLA.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I misread that. So thank you, Leslie, for correcting that. So clearly easier explanation of why it's tier 3. That is the totality of what we have. If any of the reviewers want to comment on that, love to hear what they have to say. Any other comments or recommendations?
Yeah, any questions about those or any disagreement as to the classification? Okay.
Okay, next one we have, Ryan, is Severe and Wayne. And Greg, that's yours.
Yep. So again, a regionalization project here. So we have some shared renewal items. Managing defender, total cost of $127,400, and then shared admin position of $42,300. They also individually are requesting some renewals. Severe has a conflict provider contract that is paid for by the grant, and then partial funding for their child welfare attorney and primary justice attorney. And then Wayne receives partial funding for their primary district contract. So then the new items that they have proposed is an additional contract for primary juvenile court in Wayne for $15,000, an additional parental defense contract for $43,550, and an additional district court contract for $70,000. They have provided a case for all of these, showing that they would decrease the burden on the managing defender. So they were classified as tier 1.
Greg, do we know if that additional contract for primary juvenile in Wayne, is that delinquency, child welfare, is it both? And is that basically the sole or main contract for Wayne, or is that now a supplemental piece?
I'm just reviewing the note on that one.
And I know Joanna has been covering quite a bit of juvenile court there from her managing.
Johanna, I'm Joanna.
So I guess
I have not been in
I think
juvenile.
my age was. Yeah. Doesn't she do juvenile court?
She does do some juvenile court work and child welfare. I don't remember the details from that as far as what the specific was. I apologize.
Greg, I don't think it matters for purposes of today. I was just curious what.
I think if you go to the comments and the additional information for Severe and Wayne, she's specifically commented on.
So
she's primary on child welfare in Wayne, she says.
Okay.
So Margaret, do you have concerns about any of the?
No, I know. I
tier?
think it's
Okay.
correct as tier 1, and I just verified that she Johanna has that juvenile work, so this would definitely decrease and her caseload there.
I think it's notable to her comment about increasing in the application, increasing core principle 2 access to counsel, that the judge has modified his appointment behaviors based on our funding, which is great and was a perennial problem with that particular judge not appointing for both parents or appointing one attorney to represent both parents. And he understood that, but he didn't have an option. So increasing his ability to do what he needs to do is also an effect of our funding, which I think is great. Yay, system improvements.
I agree.
So the language in this supplemental info and in the executive summary does refer to it as a child welfare contract.
Does anybody have any concerns about the tiers?
I don't.
Okay. I believe there's no concerns there. Then we're on to Tooele.
Tooele, yes. So Tooele has mostly renewals. So we have renewal on a managing defender contract and then partial funding on 4 other contracts, as well as some renewal funding for administrative assistance. They were awarded 6 months of funding through non-lapsing. For an administrative assistant, they split that into 2 part-time positions. And so that's a renewal of those 2 part-time positions. And then new requests would be an additional attorney contract to reduce the managing defender's caseload, which places that at tier 2 for $52,836. And then a $29,000 defense resource and reserves request, which is placed at tier 3.
Any comments by those who reviewed this application? Any thoughts by anybody else that we need to revisit any of the tier designations? All right, on to Uinta, Daggett, and Vernal.
Uinta's new items are all tier 3. A lot of them are either straight compensation increases or restoration of benefits, which we are categorizing as compensation increases. And then additionally, a social worker. And then can you go to the second page, Greg? The rest are their renewal items. So they've got the managing defender and support staff already in place and benefits for those as well. And then district contract, juvenile court contract, and conflict counsel.
And Heather and Michael, you made some comments after your review too. Do you want to share any of that? Anything you want to add to or suggest, discuss?
I'm happy to jump in. It wasn't clear to me why the $8,000 for the Vernal City Justice Court. And for those of you who don't know, the Vernal City Justice Court and the Uinta County Justice Court are in the process of merging so that the City Justice Court will be doing all of the work for both the city and the Uinta County. And I just couldn't make sense of what the $8,000 was geared toward and had some question about that. Joanna, I think we got some supplemental information about that, but even the supplemental information, if you guys look at the kind of italicized part at the top of the page there. Yeah, on the top of the Vernal City part.
Before this call, Jordan and I directly called Lance and Jenny in Uinta and got some clarification on that. And it sounds like that $8,000 would be actually a compensation increase to increase the Vernal City contract. So we had reclassified it since you reviewed it to instead a tier 3 compensation increase.
Okay, that's helpful.
So thanks for the close review on that one.
And the only reason we reached out to them was because even with the supplemental information, we still didn't understand. And so we just wanted that clarification so we knew what we were doing.
It was the equivalent, though, of what they were doing with the other compensation increases, but just in the Vernal City Justice Court context. Is that right?
A little bit. Vernal City applied 2 years ago with us. the contract amounts were different. They didn't actually fill out the grant application. They kept funding it. The goal was to maybe change some things around, but by adding to that existing contract with that 8,000, it's a little confusing to me, quite honestly, and not maybe thoroughly thought through.
Okay, so tier 3, and then we can kind of unfortunately not get to those items. Is that right?
Like
the other question I had, and this is just more deep-rooted concern, well, deep-rooted concern, just an observation really, is why they've structured their juvenile court contracts the way that they have. I mean, they talk about increasing, looking at the materials now. Can you go to the breakdown again of the, they were talking about a specialized contract, an additional specialized contract for juvenile court matters. Which one is that? Is it on the page above this? Juvenile court contract 1 of 2 for indigent cases.
I think they did.
That's a renewal though.
I think they said additional in the executive summary. I think I remember seeing this when I was reading.
But they're renewals.
Oh, but they're actually renewals. I think they just mean like, oh, it's another one of ours, not that it's a new additional one.
Okay, that's fine. Never mind then. Disregard everybody.
Well, I think maybe the confusion there is that they were previously not specialized, and so they are renewals, but they're, I think, maybe specializing one of the contracts, I believe.
So they're taking an existing contract and modifying some of what it does to be more specialized.
I think, and that's also because they just lost their child welfare defender, or a juvenile court defender, to the bench. Yay us for having great public defenders, but it does also exacerbate the need for juvenile defenders around the state.
Yep.
That resolves my issues. I don't know if Heather had anything additional. I know she had some comments when she did her review. But...
I had comments about tier 3 mostly, so we can just table those.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
So in this supplemental information, they put in a disagreement with one of the tier placements. Does there need to be a conversation on that?
Probably. So this is regards to restoration of benefits, if my old eyes can see that. Yeah.
That's correct.
Sorry, Greg, I was piling on with Joanna about your screen size there.
The short story on benefits is we funded them in the beginning because we had plenty of money. And then during COVID, we said, county, you need to take these over because we don't have plenty of money anymore. And the question is, do we restore them? Again, we don't pay benefits on anyone but these 2 positions. We've never paid benefits on anyone but these 2 positions, with the exception of Salt Lake County employees. So that is a little bit trickier.
But are these, when you say restoration of benefits, are these county employees that were, and that's different than contracted defenders who?
Except that yours and Rich's amounts include benefits within them.
Right,
yeah, they
but we
became
don't
county
get, like,
employees.
benefits.
When we started our IDC efforts out there, they moved into county employment as part of the restructuring of it at that time.
Got it.
So the director and the assistant work for the county, and we paid full total compensation at first, benefits and salary. Are the other occasions that we have people working for the counties, we're not paying benefits, we're just paying salary for them?
Except for Salt Lake County.
Which doesn't work for the contract, LDA contracts, right? They're not county employees. Am I understanding that correct?
But their employees get benefits, and when we fund an employee in Pam or Rich's office, they get benefits.
We fund it with benefits. What do we do with the other contract ones? When we fund employees there, do we fund with benefits or without?
Without. Sad but true.
Well, when we're looking at contract people, do we know that though? I mean, because like contract amounts for attorneys are just like it concludes like if Davis County is paying, I'm making up numbers right now, right? But like they're paying $90,000 for X to be the district court defender. That $90,000 is how much, isn't all salary, right? It's like, this is what we're going to pay you to do the job. And that attorney has to cover their malpractice insurance, their health insurance, their salary. So it's included in the cost of that person to do the job.
Yes, and we also don't require them not to take private cases or any other contracts just yet, right? And I think ultimately looking at how we pay for these things and across the board to level it based on different counties' standard of living is the priority for the IDC that I don't know that we can fully address right this second, but I think all of those points are enormously valid and vexing.
Does anybody want to move the benefits? Well, first of all, staff, do you feel that this explanation that they put in here changes your mind on designating it as a tier 3?
It doesn't change my opinion.
Did
from
we
anything we discussed.
Did we make a deal with them?
Well, we funded it before, but then we've quit funding it. So I'm sure the perspective on who made the deal and what the deal was might be different depending on if you're IDC staff or if you're the county. So is that inaccurate? I'm just guessing, pure speculation. I'm seeing signals from the bullpen that might be correct.
I think that's fair. And as I think was said, the county has picked this up. So at this point, that's the new deal.
Does anybody on the commission want to change that tier back to tier 1 in light of their request?
I guess the question is, are we going to cross swords with another grantee in this process?
I don't believe we will this year, Michael. I think the discussion we've just been having is something we've got to have during the summer and fall and decide in the future, because there is, as Joanna pointed out, there is some inconsistency. Maybe we like it, but this is a good example. And you're right, we said we'll pay this in benefits, and we're fortunate the county picked up that cost. So let's talk in future about how we handle that, try to see what consistency we can create. But they're not going to be overly annoyed. They know this might not happen.
They just sound like it.
If that's the case, then and it's also something that we can readdress with tier 3 money like everything else. So if they are super annoyed, and we can move on from that. Any other question as to this one? All right, it looks like we're on to Utah County.
Washington, actually.
Yeah, I didn't say we did Utah. All right, Washington County. 2 left, guys. Your soldiers, your troopers. Good job.
Leslie, you want to go ahead?
Washington County is another, someone just 4 renewals of what they had last year. The one kind of funky thing is the very last request on here, the appeals contract is actually a renewal of non-lapsing, but we listed all renewals of non-lapsing as renewals throughout this worksheet.
And I'll add that this is a contract they currently have in place to provide the service, and is not billed hourly. It's handled as a contract for the provider, which is currently was in place and is going to be renewed. Probably going to be renewed.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Any of those who reviewed it have any thoughts different on this tier system?
I tried to raise my hand, Ryan.
Oh, speak up.
So I think this is great that Washington County has a contract in place now for juvenile delinquency appeals and has very specialized, excellent, professional, amazing attorneys handling them. Yes, one of them is on the commission and involved, and it's fantastic. The greater issue I have with calling this a tier 1, and we've debated this, is that it is not, from non-lapsing, and we talked about it at the time that the non-lapsing would end in June. That's okay if we want to make that tier 1. The bigger problem is we don't fund any other counties of the second class appeals, adult, criminal, juvenile, or otherwise. So I think on that strategic planning list, we need to talk about how second class counties provide appellate representation, and what, if any, help we should give going forward. But that's not an objection to the tier designation. It's a comment, an observation. I'll stop. We're well past time.
So how long is their contract with this? It sounds like they have an existing contract that they feel there's a deal that they made it last year, and that's why they're requesting it.
Yes, essentially. I won't speak to the last part. I don't think that's fully accurate, but
okay.
They entered a contract to use that non-lapsing funds for that period of time, recognizing they couldn't be guaranteed for it to be in the next year. They're asking for it because they are ready to enter another contract if they have this funding. I'm not certain how they'll handle it if they don't, but they're trying to look for expertise. They're really only focusing on, I think you can see it's on juvenile side. So we've identified it as a renewal because it exists and it is intended to be ongoing, but it's John is right. It was never a full commitment with non-lapsing funds that we would continue to fund anything, but their request seems to fit in that category.
Would
staff? It's certainly an issue for discussion in future.
Would staff and the commission feel comfortable leaving it as tier 1 for this grant cycle, and then putting it on our list of refinement for the tier system? It looks like there might be a benefits question that we need to answer and refine. There's this question. Is everybody comfortable with that, or better said, is anybody uncomfortable with that? All right, looks like we're headed to Weber.
Great. I think we can do this relatively quickly too. I hope you can see the renewal items at the bottom. They claim as tier 1. We've agreed with that. Those are ongoing contracts too. The new items we have, they've claimed as tier 1. Compensation increases for 2 different attorneys is not something we've handled. We've approved in the others. The juvenile delinquency contract, I think the explanation we received, if I recall everyone else's team, I don't believe that was clear that it would lower the burden of a managing defender. And the civil commitment piece, civil commitment position is specifically tied to the caseload of the managing defender, and the claim is that that would no longer be a responsibility of that defender, but someone else would pick up that contract. So those are what we have to offer. Any questions or concerns? Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it looks like we're changing two of their requests that are claimed tier 1 designations to tier 3, but one of their, they claimed it as tier 3. We're changing it to tier 1, or staff's recommendation is, based on what you just explained. Does anybody have questions, concerns, thoughts that need to be addressed on that tier designation? Pam, it looks like you had a question. Did you get an answer about, was it for specific hearings or specific courtrooms on the juvenile contract?
Oh, right. I was trying to remember which county I had that question on. There it is.
We won't forget you, Pam. We got you.
Oh, good. Thanks, you guys. No, I'm confused by, and I don't know, Margaret, if you read this. I mean, I know you weren't an evaluator on this, but I'm confused by what they're trying to do with this juvenile contract. I mean, I don't think it changes the designation of what it is, but are they, and Joanna, maybe you know, are they actually trying to create like a specialized delinquency versus child welfare person to split between 3 judges, or just to have that first appearance juvenile court cases?
So I have talked to, I talked to Brian Barron a while back, who is the civil county attorney and former juvenile defender in Weber. And his understanding was that this was going to increase the specialization of the juvenile defenders because there would be a split in the caseload. I don't think it's totally clear in how then the county has applied for it. So the answer is I don't really have an explanation, but I think they're on the right track with specialization. And then building a juvenile managing attorney. Sorry, that was the other part of it. Building up, because Weber is such an expansive system, separating the management into adult criminal and juvenile court.
Yeah, it's too bad they didn't tease out the ability to develop, like, because they have a large enough caseload really probably to tease out managing at least juvenile versus adult, and if this would have helped that. But I don't.
And I think that's partly because their managing defender is over an adult, he's an adult defender and over 8 or 9 adult defenders, and is pretty separate from the juvenile. I mean, I think they're trying to build the juvenile side more.
It looked like from the summary, they were turning 3 contracts into 4. I think 2 child welfare and 2 delinquency, and then adding the management piece. Is that correct?
Okay, Ryan, I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Did Margaret understand that correctly?
I think so. I think and I certainly the detention piece is an important piece was provided in their supplemental. So I'm satisfied with it.
Well, thank you. Anybody have any concerns then about the tier designations? It's kind of coincidental that basically the change from 3 to 1 is actually more than that they were requesting the other way around, but good for them, worked out well. Okay, does anybody, so this is the end of the applications, if I understand correctly?
Correct.
Correct.
I just encourage us all as you think through this, and I'll be quiet in just a second here, Joanna. As we think through this, if there's anything else concerning, it has to get to staff as quickly as possible, because if we're going to stick with our plan and we haven't made that motion and have the vote yet, we won't do it till next meeting. We will vote. The proposal is going to be, the motion is going to be to fund tier 1, then tier 2, then figure out what we do with tier 3. Once we do that, that commits us down a pretty set path. So if there's any concerns from anything you reviewed that you don't think were addressed, please advise as soon as possible to staff. And thank you, staff, for the excellent job you did again. Joanna, did you have anything else you want to address? I saw that last slide. Anything else?
Yeah, if we're ready to just move on to the final tier 3 question for right now, it'll take fewer than 15 minutes, I promise, despite its complexity.
Go ahead.
I don't think we should deal with tier 3 right now because this is an impossible conundrum. There's no way, we've brainstormed this. There've been some good ideas. I talked to Michael Drexel earlier today. He had a good idea about dividing it by judicial districts or managing defenders, doing flat amounts. We know that there's a real need for defense resources, and we know that based on the categories of requests, that all the people, social workers, investigators, I have it right here. Social workers, investigators, mileage, support staff, all of these things are necessary, but could be funded on an hourly basis if we can't fund it all. So there may be some way that we can develop this tool, or it may be that we use that 200,000 for something else going forward because we can't meet this adequately right now. And we start to document exactly what our request to the legislature is, which will our governor's request will happen in October, so it's not that far off, right? And we build the plan to Mary's salient point. How do we develop social workers? How do we develop these additional services around managing defenders? But I don't know that we know enough or have a picture of how to divide these requests right now equitably.
Just
That's,
speaking for one
that-
commissioner, I'm where you're at. I don't know.
well, great, because I don't have a vote, so.
Yeah, I
Well-
would argue we shouldn't do anything because we're just being arbitrary. If we just cut it up in 29 pies, factor in population and throw it out into the wind, that doesn't make any sense.
You know, one thing I thought was we've got this group of managing defenders that's slowly taking shape across the state, and it might be nice to maybe even get them as a group to sit down and talk as managing defenders about what prioritization they as a group might make for tier 3 funding, help formalize them as a group and get them thinking about advocating for these sort of defense related issues as a body.
Can I also put a plug in for juvenile delinquency and child welfare appeals? It's, you know, including counties of tier or class 2.
I like all those ideas. I'm wondering if either another subcommittee or in our next meeting, after we take the other vote, we figure out how to prioritize that. If it is, what ones do we think most meet the IDC's core values and strategically move the work along the best of the tier 3? Because it sounds like there's various things in tier 3 we can fund. But I think that's a better discussion for the whole group.
Greg is not looking at the camera though, because he's writing his letter of resignation, because this will mean extra work for him. However, I will talk you through that.
Can we use it to give Greg a raise to retain him?
I'm gonna have to run that by the governor's office if $200,000 raises are appropriate.
Not all of it. Some of it.
Something, I just want to put this out there, something that our office is missing is a trial level expert, right? A trial level person. I was an appellate defender. Adam has worked in the child welfare realm. But as we think about really involving managing defenders, and yes, they're a great group, Idaho has a bunch of regional coordinators who are attorneys around the state who actually help work for their IDC and help to coordinate the managing defenders and the systems. Just thinking about future structural evolutions, if we hold on to this funding and think about making the other requests. Anyway, there may be lots of different structural things to think about with this funding.
On a completely different note, other than structural considerations, I'm here as a functioning in private practice criminal defense attorney, and I've had a bunch of people contact me about this particular issue. So in my sort of representative capacity, I'll toss it out there. The mileage request is fairly low in terms of the amount of money sought, but it is something that has really struck a nerve. Part of what the IDC is attempting to accomplish is to have rural communities served in defense and appellate practice in the same manner and to the same quality that urban areas are served. And I have had more than one person who might bid, for example, on job positions or taking on contracts to serve remote areas back away from that, or have heard that they are backing away recently when they found out they might not get mileage. A couple of people saying things like, I had a contract to do something in X county that's, 200 miles from my home in Ogden, and I put 20,000 miles on my car last year doing that contract. And if they're not even going to buy my gasoline, forget it. I'll just stay working in the Wasatch Front. And we cannot take care of remote rural Utah counties with the populations of attorneys who are actually living in those counties. And we especially can't do it once you start to fund people in contracts for juvenile work as opposed to adult work, as opposed to delinquency work versus termination of parental rights work, because all of those areas begin to have conflicts with each other. When mom and dad are prosecuted and the kids end up in the juvenile system, for example, you need at least 4 attorneys for that mix. And there aren't 4 attorneys practicing in some of these counties. So the mileage issue has apparently struck a real nerve with some folks. And in terms of getting qualified attorneys to bid on these contracts in the future, that is something I would encourage us to look at funding. I know it's not the kind of structural thing we've been talking about, but it's a big issue out there in the world.
I'm just gonna pile on there and say it is totally a structural issue because there's not defenders in these communities. And I put in the chat the total mileage that was requested, and I fully agree with you. And we've paid mileage before and we had to cut it for COVID. And we funded some of it with non-lapsing, but I couldn't agree more with Mary.
I stand corrected. It is absolutely dead bang a structural issue.
Well, and I mean, that's something that we, is not, seems like as far as requested and needs, that's something that's clearly we could fund within that 200,000. It seemed to do it in an even-handed and equitable way.
I'm not the chair of this meeting, but that sounded like a recommendation, a motion for a recommendation.
On a motion, when we get to the next meeting, we can take a motion on it. But staff, can you make sure that's in the part of the discussion of the agenda that says tier 3? I think the issues that have been brought up have been mileage, social work, parental defense. Did I miss any that were highly concerning as we went through?
Appeals of parental defense or appeals of juvenile court.
All right, with that, is Joanna, staff, did we hit all the items that you wanted to? Do you have enough direction for the next meeting?
With one exception, there's no one asking for juvenile court appeals other than Washington County. So I think we've already considered those for tier 3, for our tier 1 funding. So I don't know what else we would consider for tier 3 funding. I think long-term discussing them is a big issue, but for specific tier 3 funding, we have no pending requests for those.
Yeah, I was thinking that was the issue that we would discuss after we do this next meeting in the off season, so to speak, or after we do the grant funding. There was the appeals for juvenile court. There was benefits. I think those were the 2 issues I remembered. Appeals for juvenile court and benefits.
Pay equity, and then also how to implement managing defender standards. We've got a list. We're keeping a list for you.
So we'll put that on that list if that's okay with you, Mary. And then we'll, with that, is there anything else, Strata?
We
Okay.
made it before 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you all. Appreciate you all.
Thank
And
you.
since
Thank you
we
all.
don't have a quorum, we don't need a motion. So when you leave, you voted.